it very well may be the case that we have more free will in certain circumstances and less over others. You do not have will over who your parents are, but you do have will over what you will eat next. And one of the interesting things for that argument that even the choices you make are the result of a chain of events. You had a thought, and that thought was inspired by something, and then you acted based upon that thought. So it's not truly like this spontaneous rising of will, or you say, I am going to eat a salad. It's more you see something like some video, and it's like, why it's important to eat salad, and you think, I should eat salad. Well, maybe I will eat salad. Okay, I will go eat salad. So this is kind of one of the arguments, is that it goes back to the Dolbach's determinism, that everything is the result of a chain that is put in motion previously. But this is also kind of a weird argument, because, what on God's earth, you don't just act all of a sudden. It's a weird conception of will, that it should be spontaneously arisen with no response to its environment. Nothing exists like that. And of course you'd say, well, nothing has free will. But I don't think I don't think will is something that requires an existence completely divorced from its environment. On the contrary, we exercise will in relation to our environment constantly. That's when will comes into place. When you wake up and decide, you know what, today I'm not going to skip breakfast. I'm going to change something. And I think change is one of the very interesting examples of why there are some holes in that free will argument. We do make changes. So how can that change spontaneously occur if it's not, of course, put into motion by other things, but it is a change in the exercise of will?
So the last thing I'll say about this, because I just consider myself totally against it. They would say that you're mistaking. So you're setting out a vision of outside external forces acting upon something that you're proposing and calling the will, as if the will is privileged over these other outside external forces and has some sort of ability to make choices based on the interaction with those forces. But then a strictly materialist person would say, what you're calling will is just the combination of a bunch of neurons firing in your brain in certain specific patterns that were already predetermined by genetics or other or environmental things, all this kind of stuff. So you're mistaking the notion of will for something that is above and is different than.
It's not like a conscious process.
Just
is the
materialism,
idea.
right?
Yeah, I think.
Which again, I must reject, if for no other reason that.
You want to live a peaceful, semi-productive life.
Well, no, there's no peace in it either. That's the funny thing, right? Because I mean,
that's true.
In some sense,
good point.
It's almost worse.
It is almost
worse.
The
one good argument for determinism you can make is that you can basically excuse everything.
Flaws.
Yeah, you can absolve. Right? You can say, well, this is just how the world was, which I can understand the reason to want to believe that.
But here's the thing, though. And this is why I think that really it comes down to the more interesting way to get some, how do you say, kind of make some ground with this argument is to look at its application in the real world. And again, so an extension of that idea of the inner locus of control versus the outer locus of control is the result of people over-identifying with either of these things. So it's interesting because there's this concept of defeatism and aspirationism. So this is another way to kind of understand the identification of oneself with will or lack thereof. So defeatism, people that are defeatist are going to tend to over identify with things being out of their control. And that's kind of, this idea that, well, yeah, sure, I can start a business, but the economy's out of my control. The starting place that I'm starting at is largely out of my control. The chances I will get in starting that business are largely determined by luck. I can't go out. I don't have all the best connections. That's just where I'm starting at. So you would focus on all these things that are beyond your control, and it's a highly unmotivating, depressing outlook that tends to breed failure in people. Defeatism, it cuts down your reasons for trying. Now, it's interesting because aspirationism is the other extreme of this. So aspirationism would be a radical view of free will, which is everything is under the control of will. And I personally don't actually think that that's the right way either. I think it's a more pragmatic approach to view will as something that increases and decreases based upon where you're trying to apply it. Obviously not everything is under our control, and not everything is going to be a simple matter of willing yourself, willing cancer out of your body or something. That's not in your control largely. There are things that are in your control. Do you go to the doctor a lot? Do you follow the medical protocol that the doctor gives you? Those things would be more in your control, not the actual illness. No, I don't either. I guess we are defeatists and we're just here arguing for the sake of argument. But the aspirationist is the one that would believe cancer actually is entirely in your control. So, okay, maybe it's in your genetics, sure. But if you live right, if you exercise, if you eat properly, if you go to the doctor regularly, you can prevent even cancer. And if you get it, you can still heal it if you do everything right. These people also will fail and kind of devolve into a neurosis because not everything is in your control. There are some people that still remember that guy, the Men's Magazine guy that was like super fit and then got cancer at 40 and died. Yeah, there was this. Yeah, he was like I forgot what he was. He was like the owner or like somehow in charge of Men's Magazine, super fit guy. Obviously health was his life, and he got cancer and he died young. And so this is an example of, not everything is always in our control. And that's true. There are some places where you can will yourself to be the healthiest person, but there is still a degree of the world that is beyond the control of individual will. And so
I reject it. You're an aspirationist? I reject that also. I'm an extreme aspirationist, I guess. I might as well be that also. Because it's just your balanced approach to this, and in your notes that you shared with me beforehand, you mentioned Stoicism as a
It is kind of the balanced approach. Stoics take a more balanced approach to this, which I think is interesting because there is the arguments of free will go way back into, like you were saying, and the Stoics also took their own approach to will, and they did believe that there was that the most effective way for the human to progress throughout life was not to over-identify with a lack of free will or the radical free will, but was instead to see where you do have freedom and control and where you don't. And then you overemphasize those places in which you do have freedom and control. You should focus on these more. And this is the Stoic idea, but it's also a fairly well-researched concept in psychology that it is a healthier outlook for life to focus on the places in which you do have control as opposed to the places which you don't. And this is very basic cognitive behavioral CBT shit, like the therapy that tries to kind of reframe the way you think things as opposed to taking a very catastrophic approach. Something happens, I'm going to look for the worst outcome possible. That's one of the things you do have control over. And the entire school of CBT, that therapeutic philosophy that is one of the few types of therapy that actually has research showing its efficacy, this it's based upon the premise that you do have some amount of control over at least the patterns of thought that you choose to apply to the world. So this is again the idea, like, okay, maybe we cannot prove one way or the other through even argument that there is or is not free will, but we can look at the outcome of these views. And the outcome of viewing that you have no control over your entire life and self is long been shown to be correlated with, negative outcomes, health, physical health, mental health, all that.